Hi, thank you for using my court coach. I'm Jalen, and I'll be your instructor as we talk about this request for order form FL 300. So we're talking about this form in the context of a temporary emergency order. So if the court has granted your temporary emergency order already, then the court is also asking you to come back a second time for it to further discuss or decide the underlying issues behind your temporary emergency order. Then this is the form that you need to make sure you complete. So if there's an existing order in place and you're actually trying to change it, and I'm not saying that the existing order is the temporary emergency order. No, it's an order that existed prior to the temporary emergency order. If that order exists, then you're trying to change it. You would need to check off this box. Again, this is not to check off the box to change the temporary emergency orders, is to change the existing orders before the emergency orders went into effect. So that's when you would check off this box. Now, if otherwise you wouldn't check off this box. And now the issues under the temporary emergency orders are likely to be one of the issues that are on this form, because the court's having you come back a second time to discuss why the temporary emergency orders are either in place or why they should be removed or restricted or whatever it might be. It gives the other party an opportunity to be heard fully on that issue. So for the child custody and visitation, you would check off that boxes if those two issues are related to your temporary emergency order. Same goes for spouse support, child support, domestic violence orders, attorney's fees and costs, property control, or some other issue like issuing the passport, for example. So those boxes would need to be checked in order for the court to actually hear your issues at the upcoming hearing. So I'm presuming that this form would be used for a temporary emergency order that has been granted. So it must be granted, all right? Because this box is checked. So it means that there's emergency orders in place and it relates to one of these issues. So you'd have the notice, you name the other party in which the orders are being made against, and then the date, the time, the department, and where this hearing is going to happen, because the other party has an opportunity or should get the opportunity to be heard as to why we should change the emergency orders that are in place. You don't worry about this section at all because it is a court order and it specifically states for court use only. So, the restraining order information. If there's already a restraining order in place, then you must complete this section. You have to state who the restraining order is against or what parties it's against. And then you also have to include whether it's a criminal order, a family order, a juvenile order, or some other protective order of some sort. You would have to list that on this form. The court has to be notified of that. Then, if you're requesting child custody and visitation, you would in fact check off these boxes. Make sure that you list each child under your custody and visitation request, as well as their date of birth, and then who has legal custody and physical custody. Orders that you are requesting can be found in one of these forms or as follows. And then the orders that you're requesting that are in the best interest of the children, it's because, and if there's already an emergency order in place, and we are assuming that there are emergency orders in place when we're using this form, then we're requesting it because it's in the best interest of the children. And let's say, child welfare services is involved, and that's why you're requesting what you're requesting. There's a safety plan or something in place. So you're requesting that the court make any changes to the current order, and you have to tell the court what exactly is that change. Now, we have these boxes, child custody and visitation, and those are two very different things. Child custody relates to legal custody and physical custody, so it goes back to what's written here. So either you're trying to change it or keep it the same, and same goes for physical custody. And it tells you physical custody is whom the child lives with, legal custody is who decides the health, education, and essentially the overall welfare of the child. So those boxes also need to be checked here if you're trying to make changes to both. If you're only trying to make changes to legal custody, then you'd only check off legal custody and you'd only fill out number 1 here. Now, the order that the legal and physical custody was filed, and that is the date that the court actually signed off on the order, not the day of your hearing that the court made the order. So there's a difference there. So the date that the custody was actually filed, that would go here. And then the date for visitation would also go here. So if there's any parenting time, visitation time, that hearing or that filing date would go here, and then what the court order. And I have to reiterate one more time that it's not what's listed on the temporary emergency order. Okay, it's before the temporary emergency orders were in place. So child support, same thing. The child support, you'd have to check off that box, list each child, and then whether you're requesting guideline support or some other amount. You want to change the court order for child support that's filed on a specific date. And then the child order child support is as follows, and you'd write what the current child support order is. You'd have to complete this form called an income and expense declaration. And the court should make or change the support orders because of whatever reason that is related to the emergency. So remember, you have to think of immediate irreparable harm to you, your child, or property in order for the court to make that change. And so you would write the reasons why in this box. And then spousal or domestic partner support. So you have to fill out the amount requested, what you want changed, what you want the court to go ahead and end. And the request is to modify spouse support after entry of judgment, means after the court has entered a final order in your case for dissolving your marriage, and support has been made as part of the dissolution of marriage, then you would go ahead and check off this box. You would also complete your income and expense declaration, and then the court should make those changes because, and it has to, again, be related to immediate irreparable harm to you, your property, or your child. And then property control. So there's this box right here, and it says, I request temporary emergency orders. So this would be heard on your emergency hearing date, and you would go ahead and check off these boxes if you are in fact requesting the temporary emergency order that's related to this property control. So the petitioner, the respondent, the other party, you're basically asking that the court give that person temporary use, possession, and control of the property that you two own or are buying or leasing or renting, and that information would go here. So like a house, a car, a boat, whatever it might be, that should go here. And then the petitioner or respondent or the other parent has to be ordered to make the following payments on the debts or liens associated with those properties. And so you would list who it's paid for, like Wells Fargo, for the mortgage, and the amount on the mortgage, and then the due date. And then if this is changing a current order relating to the property, then you have to type in the date in which the court actually filed the orders related to that. So I want to go back to the I request a temporary emergency order, because you checked off this box and you already had your emergency hearing, and the court may or may not have granted you the emergency order, right? And so we're filling this out in the context that the court had already awarded you the emergency order. So if they've already awarded you the property control, then you already have the court orders associated with that. But again, the other party has the ability to ask or to, I guess, defend themselves as to why these emergency orders should not be in place. So it's very important that this box is in fact checked if the court did grant you the emergency orders. So if this box is not checked, then it's because you didn't go to an emergency hearing. Attorney's fees and costs. So again, if that's related to the immediate harm to your child or property, then you would also fill this portion out and tell the court what exactly and how much that you are requesting in attorney's fees. You'd have to complete an income expense declaration, a specific request for attorney's fees and costs, and then a declaration to support those attorney's fees and costs. Now, this is for the domestic violence order. It specifically says you're not going to use this form for a domestic violence restraining order. You're not going to be requesting it through this form. So this is to show that already a restraining order has been filed. It's already in place and it was filed on this particular day, and that you're asking the court to either change it or end it. They're changing the personal conduct orders, the stay away orders, the move out orders, or any other protective orders that are listed in the restraining order. So you would have to tell the court what it is that you're requesting for it to change, and the reasons why you want it to change or end. And so the court can entertain that at your hearing. Other orders requested, so like I said, issuance and passport, selling the house, those sort of requests can also be listed in here. And then time for service. More likely than not, the court is or has granted you what they call a order shortening time. So to expedite your hearing, to advance your hearing a little bit earlier, and then when they advance the hearing, then the other party also has an opportunity to respond in writing if they so wish. And so the time for service and time until hearing. So this is needed because the court has a hearing date that's, coming up in, let's say, a week from now. And so you have to make sure that the other party has a copy of this in time for the hearing, right? Because there's statutory deadlines associated with filing and serving, like delivering a request for order form, this FL 300. And so if you're asking the court, or the court grants you to come back in a week, then you need also less time to provide this notice, this request for order to the other party, right? And so if your hearing is, let's say, next Friday, then you want to ask the court to allow you to serve it by Monday. So here it says I urgently need to serve this request for order no less than number of court days before the hearing. And we see the word court days. Court days are very different than calendar days. Court days are the equivalent to business days. But because the courts don't take all of the holidays that are out there, it is, I guess, named court days instead. So like MLK Day or President's Day, like those are days that the courts would not have as a business day, and therefore you would not count that towards your court days. So if your hearing's on Friday and there's no court days next week, there's no holidays next week, that the court is not in business, then you are asking the court to give you until Monday to provide these paperwork. Then you're essentially asking for 4 court days before the hearing. That's your deadline, 4 court days before the hearing, before that following Friday. So the other thing is the hearing date and service of the request for order to be sooner. And I mean, that's essentially a given because, again, you're only filling out this form because temporary emergency orders have already been filed and have been ordered. And so this portion of your request for order form would have already been granted, but you have to make sure that you are requesting to be able to file this request for order within a short period of time, and you have to explain why you need it to be less than that. So like a reason could be, oh, the other party is moving in X amount of days, and if I'm not able to serve it to them in this many days, then I won't be able to service them because they're leaving the country or something like that. Then lastly, the facts to support. So the facts that you need to support why you're requesting this second hearing for the emergency protective or emergency order, it needs to be listed here, and if it can't be completed within this section, then you have to attach a attachment 10 or any document really that is going to identify that this is a attachment to this FL 300. So to review, this document is only for temporary emergency orders that are already in existence, and the court is having you come back a second time, and that second time, date and time, is listed on here for you and the other party to come back. And generally, these requests for orders, when they're associated with temporary emergency orders, they are related to child custody and visitation. Very rarely would it be related to spouse support or child support or attorney's fees. Sometimes they might be related to property control, but most of the time it's really related to child custody and visitation. The domestic violence order, unless both parties agree that it should be changed, then the court might grant that to you on a temporary basis. But like I said, child custody and visitation is more likely than not the temporary emergency order that the court would in fact issue and would see as an immediate urgency to do something about it. So I would be more focused on using this form for those purposes. And if the court did not, let's say you requested it for property control, like the other party is trashing your house and because they don't want to sell it and therefore you need emergency orders to prevent them from doing that, then you could go ahead and check off this box when you are providing the court a blank request for order, and you can ask them to check off this I request temporary emergency order section. But it's not necessarily required to go ahead and complete this request for order form for property control, and then also check off this I request temporary emergency orders, because you're filling out this form when you already have the emergency orders in place. So I hope that you found this to be helpful, and thank you.